Welcome to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Discover the personal drive, professional journeys, and business strategies that have made a real impact. It's success from the inside out.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we're chatting with Jil Macdonald, a trailblazing technology executive and the Chief Operating Officer at Walnut Insurance. Jil's visionary leadership in digital and AI product innovation has driven significant industry savings and transformed sectors like finance, insurance, and energy. With decades of experience, she continues to revolutionize the insurance landscape through embedded insurance programs and strategic partnerships with major brands. So Jil, welcome to the show. And do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're working on?
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me. I feel like that was a mouthful for sure. I'd say what I'm working on in a day-to-day work sense is, you kind of touched it at the end, it's called embedded insurance. I think when you think of as a consumer, we all know insurance. You either love it, you hate it. You're probably on a spectrum there in terms of how you feel about it. But it does provide value in many, many instances. But what we've seen, and I think as a consumer, if you think about it, no one really wants to retell their story. And you don't really want to spend hours, minutes filling in forms online where it could really be done differently. And what Walnut really thinks about doing is we work with brands, whether that's leading telco brands, leading retail brands, financial institutions, even utility, direct-to-consumer companies. And we embed these insurance products alongside the way they're already engaging with their consumers. We do permission data sharing. So a consumer's information is passed all the way through, and the brand at that moment of time is actually presenting the insurance with an opportunity for the consumer to see it under that brand, but it's a single click or 3 clicks and you're able to secure. Just a very different way. I'd say if you think about mortgages, we're all very familiar in the fact in Canada, you at least need to have home insurance to close on that loan. Why not offer home insurance alongside that mortgage journey, saving you from needing to either go out, compare across the market, or give you quotes right within that process? Really trying to change the way consumers can be provided options for coverage in a more seamless digital way.
Okay, so just to summarize, just so it's clear in my mind and everybody else's mind there. So you're working with, say, a particular brand that's offering a service that there's going to be insurance naturally tied with it, like in the Canadian housing market, and then you're piecing that together so that you're eliminating one step essentially in the process of having now to go out to a different broker.
Absolutely. And I think even maybe a different example, and for those that might use TELUS, which is one of our leading telecom companies here, the moment you set foot into an international airport or you arrive at your arrival destination that's outside of the country, you're actually prompted with an SMS message directly from that provider. It's very common across many Canadian telco providers. Actually embedded in that SMS is a travel insurance offer provided by that brand. And if you click on that offer, all of your information's been pre-filled, and in less than 30 seconds, you're able to secure your travel insurance coverage. And so really trying to see about the presentation and opportunity for insurance alongside and changing the customer experience and actually securing that.
Okay. So Walnut is an insurance provider, is that correct?
So we're what we call a broker. We're definitely a tech company first, and we do have a brokerage that wraps around, and then we connect into all the leading insurance carriers to actually pull those products from them. We're not an underwriter and we're not an insurance carrier, but we'll connect in to actually pull those products or help manufacture those products with those carriers.
Okay, so you would work with all the major brands like the Avivas and the Wawanises and all of those.
Oh, yes. Yes, and many in the US as well. I'd say we're predominantly Canadian, but we are entering the US market and do have some partners there. But yes, pretty much all the names that you would be familiar with, we have relationships with.
Got it. What's your background? What's your history?
I'd say my history is definitely a varied path. I started my career in energy. I live in an energy city. I think we're here in an energy province, one of the biggest energy resources in the globe. And I started my career in the energy sector. I quickly realized, and I actually went to school for geophysics. So I'd say what you're seeing now in the whole data science world. I know there's a lot of data science, AI and ML people that were coming from that space, but I started in that world early, and then I realized I didn't love the job. Interesting interestingly enough, you were sitting in a room with 5 computers by yourself, and now I feel like I'm back full circle in that way. But it was very isolating early on in my career, and I didn't love that. And so I really looked to transition, went back to school while working and did my MBA, and really moved into what we'll call Lean Six Sigma. So process improvement, using data to essentially solve problems. I think statistical analysis, all the underpinnings of what you would start to see in some of the AI world there, and was doing that for a number of years, both with energy companies as well as a global consulting firm. And then had the opportunity to move inside of actually energy regulation, which was interesting because it was a way to take my knowledge and how to transform the regulatory and pseudo government space. So we were able to build some really interesting performance metrics, some of the first AI models in any government agency. So that was pretty exciting. And kind of from there, really continued my AI journey and my digital journey, and helped with an organization here in Alberta, which is AltaML, that builds AI products and solutions. And so helped build teams there and lead a number of projects. And then I really wanted to diversify my sector knowledge. I had worked a little bit in insurance, a bit in finance, and I felt like my knowledge around digital technology, enterprise brands and partners would be interestingly suited. And I love to put myself in a challenging spot. So I said, why not learn another sector? It's been something that I love doing. And so I kind of jumped into the insurance space, and it's been a really fantastic journey since then.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely a varying degree of industries and sectors there. Yeah, no, it's great. The insurance world itself, like when you look at that and you look at it from like what you're doing on the AI side, is that what you see being a natural transition now that we've got the data, we've got the AI models, we've got all that stuff? Is this a natural transition to go the embedded model, or do you think you guys are really at the forefront of what you're doing?
I'd say we're definitely at the forefront of what we're doing. I think from a Canadian perspective, we're one of the few organizations that are really looking at this embedded journey. You see that in the United States, and you see varied models, I'd say, but from an embedded insurance perspective on a Canadian lens, we are one of the few on how you actually leverage technology to create those opportunities. And I think it is all about creating those right technology integrations and the right partnerships to allow brands to essentially market insurance, something we're all familiar with, but how do you market it in a way that the consumer's already interacting with the brand and it's not an additive and it feels seamless to what they would expect?
Yeah. Okay. Throughout your journey and the different roles that you've had, obviously some fairly high-end roles higher up in the organization. What are some of the challenges maybe that you faced being a female in a lot of those roles, when I'm going to guess that a lot of people on the other side of the table or at that table were not female? And I think we're seeing a lot more gender parity or gender equality coming in today, but it's pretty new. So what were some of the challenges that you've had to face there?
Great question, Matt. You know what's interesting? I actually say I found less challenges on a gender and found more challenges on an age demographic. And I was one of the youngest leaders in the energy regulation space, younger leaders at many other organizations. And I'd say that is, you have varying scales. I'd say sometimes challenging because you may have a different way of thinking, a different way of approaching. You have a different learned experience and background that you're coming. And my personality is typically to challenge in a way that can be constructive, but use data and information to inform. And a lot of times that puts individuals that maybe have been operating in a similar fashion for much of their career in an uncomfortable sense. They're not sure how to manage that challenge and that change. Ultimately, my goal is always to change for the benefit of the organization or the benefit of the shareholders. But really, when you're dealing with the legacy culture, it is a challenge. I'd say I definitely had some roadblocks, but it's all about navigating or rallying yourself with mentors in a community or allies within the organization and finding those that are going to help you navigate. But I'd say, interestingly enough, even being in the energy space that is predominantly, I think we're seeing such a shift, predominantly male. You see tech, which is also shifting quite a bit, but and does have a high tendency. Insurance, definitely a high tendency in terms of that gender parity. But I'd say age has been an interesting piece for me more than anything.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. You had the double whammy of it, right? You had to deal with the young age and being maybe one of the only females in the room, which is challenging. But yeah, good for you. On the mentorship side that you had mentioned there, one thing I do like to ask people, and particularly women, is when you were looking for mentors, were you specifically looking for women? Were you looking for men? Were you looking for a mix of both, or did it matter?
I'd say it didn't matter. To me, I think that those elements never matter in
Yeah.
terms of it's really about looking for champions, differential voices, individuals that may push your thinking, question you, have you look differently at something, or have some knowledge from previous that can pass that on. So I'd say for me, it's never been, does it need to be this gender, this race, this sex, this age? It's very much, and I very much just on where can I see that they have a different thought? I'd say I have mentors that are younger than I am. I have mentors that are peers. I have mentors that are definitely double my age. And so I'd say for that, and they're all different genders and different ethnicities. For me, it's very much just what's that community that's going to support you,
Yeah.
and maybe not always looking for that box per se.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. What do you think some of the skills that you have that have really helped you perform and exceed in the areas that you've worked in?
I'd say I love change. This probably is because my father was in the military for majority of my life. I got the joy of going to over a dozen schools before grade four. So I think the act of change for me has just been ingrained in my subconscious in how I operate. So I'd say change and flexibility alongside grit. I think that that's been a very important piece that I think sometimes we often mistake. You see that a lot in scale up and startup companies, but the desire to be flexible in terms of your role, what's happening around you, how do you keep true to where your focus is, but understand where you may need to navigate and be
Yeah.
comfortable with change because change is around us every single day in both personal and professional and will continue to always be. But I think the biggest is grit. Just get stuff done. I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest and clarify what get the right stuff done. But I think you want to make sure that you're actually leaning in to do. And sometimes even when you get too high in an organization, you lose sight on the doing aspect. And I think
Yeah.
that there's a risk there. And so that's something that regardless of the level, you have to really maintain the ability to get your hands in and solve those problems.
Yeah. And I would say kind of what you described there would be like very entrepreneurial type qualities. Do you think that something like that, are you able to learn that? And is that from a book or is it from other people? Or is it just something that somebody has or they don't have?
You know what's interesting? I actually have had that question before, but even in hiring, as you're looking at kind of potential candidates, what I'd say is I think that there's this innate way of operating that individuals have subconsciously. Maybe
Yeah.
as a child, you were kind of looking and seeking to understand and a doer, and others you're maybe sitting back. But I think there is an ability to learn it. There's an ability to have that skill. It may not come as quickly, but I'd say being in those spaces are important. I'd actually say when I spent a number of years at Ernst& Young, and I actually say this to many individuals, being in a consulting role in a consulting organization like that,
Mhm.
it can be really powerful for your career. It's going to put you in uncomfortable scenarios where you need to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And you may not know how to do that. And you need to do that with an understanding of competency, an understanding of poise. And so there's an interesting piece that I've always said is those are earlier in their career. If there's a fit, it's a really great opportunity. May not be a fit long term, but there are some really good skills you can gain from going
Yeah.
into organizations like that. And I'd say similarly in startup spaces as well, as long as the environment is conducive to how you want to work and how you can thrive, being in a startup scale up too will put you in a pressure cooker to have to be flexible, to
Hmm.
be hands on. Otherwise, it won't be successful for you or the organization.
Yeah. Okay. Um, what the, what is the experience that you've had in the past? How's that helped shape what you do now, and specifically maybe with walnuts and what you're actively trying to do there?
I'd say my experience in the past has definitely been on working with partners and or working within organizations, both whether that has to be quite political or you're trying to maneuver in terms
Hmm.
of innovative projects and solutions being deployed, to how do you work with large enterprise partners to see where that vision should be. So I'd say my experience from taking an idea to what could that digital experience look like? What could that tool be? What could that outcome be? What could that improvement be? That's really relayed here into Walnut. I'd say from a Walnut perspective, we're really trying to think differently, trying to think about how you embed insurance in different ways, like that SMS example I mentioned to you. That's one of the first times you're seeing some of that in at least the Canadian landscape. And we
Yeah.
have a lot of other really interesting, we'll even call embedded inside. How do you use an insurance as a differentiator? How do you use augmentation like virtual health or personal cybersecurity or other things to differentiate products? And so for us, we're definitely trying to think outside the box, and we find we have to do a lot of teaching, not in like a learning sense, but in a advisory way on let's think about the future. Let's ideate that future. Let's see how we get you there. And I think a lot of my career has always been, how do we change something? So I need to figure out how to enroll others. I need to figure out how to make them champions and make them believe to see
Yeah.
that forward. And so I'd say that's just been a culmination to be able to be using that at Walnut.
Awesome. And for yourself, like somebody that's been a young leader in various organizations, what advice would you give to other young professionals that are aspiring to those leadership type of roles?
I would say that resiliency is really important. That not every day is going to be great. And I think that's for everyone in any part of your life.
Yeah.
No day is 100. And so I'd say understanding that and staying true to who you are, staying true to your honest self and maintaining integrity is going to be the most important things that will last longer than that individual role. And so I'd say that's probably the biggest, is really staying true to you and don't let singular events change the way maybe you approach something.
Okay. Going back to something you had said earlier on the grit and like the importance of doing and getting something done, particularly at higher levels within an organization. How do you balance strategic leadership with the hands-on involvement in, say, in your current role that you're working on?
Yeah, great question. I'd say I think you need to really know where you need to get your hands dirty or you need to dive in, and where
Yeah.
it's not appropriate, where you need to build up your team members, where you need to allow them to grow and work through. And so it's a balance there, I'd say, in terms of where. If you're starting to think about from a leadership perspective, of course, it's on strategy, it's on where are we focusing, setting that direction. But I'd say even if you think about kind of sales or support around accounts, it's how do you be in service of your teams? How do you help them and how do you enable them to come to you if they need support? And then you're operating in service of their objective, which is ultimately everyone's. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's probably the biggest. And at times to help them, you may have to do and show. Or if it's something new, you need to likely do and build to even set the stage conceptually for what you're thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, I always find it is a challenge sometimes going between the doing and the strategic part, because both are very important. You need both of them to be able to succeed in business. But sometimes we like one more than the other and get swayed in that direction. And a lot of times we like doing more than we like the strategic side because we know how to do and we
Yeah.
can implement that quite quickly, right?
I would agree. And actually, I think that's a common comment that happens in co-founders or scale-up organizations where it's sometimes some of the leadership can be too doing and needs to at times step back and really
Yeah.
think through and take that time to reflect and understand where they're going rather than being in that day-to-day tactic.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to shift back to the insurance side of things for a little bit here. And you talked a little bit about starting out in the US market. So you guys have, I'll call it, dabbled in the US market to date. What is that plan to go and expand? Because when you look at that market from an insurance perspective, it's massive compared to the Canadian market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say in Canada, we work with partners across all different types. You're looking at home and auto, a lot of creditor based or debt protection products,
Yeah.
your life and health, everything, and a lot of other kind of embedded benefits and travel. And in the United States, where we're focusing more on the kind of debt protection creditor space, that's one that you see a lot of creditor products here in Canada. They're pretty much against any type of debt or loan, where in the United States is not nearly as prevalent. And we've got some more innovative ways to think about how to embed and integrate those products. And that will be our first one. No, actually, that's wrong, not first one. There has been some other products we've played on in the States, but one that we're really seeing as the growth opportunity there.
So really on the finance side.
More finance, yeah. Or you looking at there's innovative products such as like bill protection. How do you offer this so that if an individual was to say lose their job or become disabled or have hospitalization, they can have a critical bill, whether that's utility or a telco bill, covered for 6 to 12 months of a period of time to allow them to make sure that those key services or support items for themselves are maintained. So a different way to think about it. There will be loan-based aspects as well, but maybe not as traditional as like a mortgage creditor, which I think people are very familiar with in Canada.
Yeah. What do you see as the future of insurance? And I'm going to preface this in one way. On our day of recording, we're one day after Hurricane Milton. Is it Milton? I think Milton.
Yes.
After that hit Florida, and I think it's ongoing today and untold devastation. I think the first number I heard was $200 billion of damage, and a lot of that's not insured down in Florida. But based on what's happening, and we're getting more insurance claims and bigger insurance claims, and even on the vehicle side, vehicles are more expensive. A fender bender might cost $5,000 now because there's backup cameras and all that stuff that we didn't used to have before. What do you see is the future of insurance?
And thanks, Matt, for bringing that up. And I'd say I also just want to offer my condolences and thoughts to those that are actively going through and have had such a huge impact to this. I think we've seen so many hurricanes through the southern US in the last couple of weeks. I'd say from this insurance space, when I think insurance always comes up when you have these large natural disaster events, because not only is it a large dollar impact, but it becomes a little bit of a political conversation, I'd say. Where I think the future of insurance in a whole is going is I think there will be more use of data as it relates to maybe personal pricing, personal underwriting, personal specifics. So that and a view, I'd say, I know that we're talking about hurricane, and at times that can be in a negative connotation, but our view, and I think my view, is that ethically, there's no way to be able to go so negatively in the fact that you live in, say, Southern Florida, and you're not able to seek insurance, or it's going to be 15 times the price. I don't think that legislatively that'll ever be able to be happening, but what I think we start to see is actually those, if you think about auto insurance, for example, those that are really strong drivers that haven't had any accidents, that really have a great record, how do you enable them with actually discount-based or better-based pricing, better coverage potential? I think if you think about coverage, typically if it's a younger male between the ages of 16 to 25, they have a really high rate versus a female. Again, a lot of those things on how's data being used more specifically to design programs, coverage needs, rather than generically putting an individual inside of a box. But I do see the use, and I think it's similar to many other industries, use of data from an IoT perspective, from a systems and tools perspective, whether that's security monitoring and others. You already start to see that being used, or discounts if you have that, to say, oh, your home is secure because your security system's turned on, things like that. But I think you're going to see changes overall. When you think of autonomous vehicles, there's going to be a complete redesign as it relates to how does auto insurance work. Is it going to be, are you going to be purchasing that for your use of that vehicle, and it's for a period of time, and it's really just covering yourself? Is someone else have insurance on the actual autonomous vehicle? So I think you're going to see some redesigns of the entire industry just to meet demands of where we're going as a society.
And will that have to be legislative led? Like, especially when it comes to, say, autonomous vehicles, is that government led, or is that going to be industry led?
I feel like with most things, and you even see this with AI regulations, typically you're starting to see industry lean in before government. I think most notably, I feel like consumers expect government to be there, but typically they're following in these instances. And I think there will be situations where the industry will have to step in order to serve the need of the consumer.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. And hopefully that's the case, because I don't think government is all that efficient at, especially when it comes to new technologies and things like that. They're not all that efficient in being able to drive that change. If you had one message, and I asked you something similar on this earlier, but if you had one message that you could share with a young professional that's coming into any industry, what would that be?
I would say grit. If I look at the young professionals that we're working with every day, I'd say grit and flexibility. I think I said these same terms before, because for me, I think they're so powerful and important. Is the grit of getting in and doing and seeking to understand. If you were not sure what to do, who do you go to help, and how do you lean in to be that doer? I think we're just seeing differential styles of work. And I think that's just an important piece in terms of enabling the flexibility, because not always, even your leader may not be sure on how to do something, but engage in that conversation and together you can sort through that, or trying and doing is probably what I would also say is important.
Yeah. Break shit and figure it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Jill, if somebody wanted to learn more about you or maybe connect with you, where would they go for that?
I'd say probably easiest is just on LinkedIn. Feel free to search my name. I feel like I might be one of the few Jills with one L.
One L, yes.
My last name is extremely popular, but spelt with a MAC rather than an MC. But you could definitely find me on LinkedIn, probably the easiest.
Awesome. Well, I really want to thank you for joining us on the show today. Awesome insights into the industry, awesome insights into your life and your background behind that. So thank you for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me.
You've been listening to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Want to be our next guest? Visit beyondwealthpodcast.ca/guest. See you on the next episode.